Want to make want to make want to make a simple loaf of white bread? I wanted to, so I did. This recipe is really simple. It's just 4 ingredients: flour, water, salt, and yeast. I'll go through those one at a time. 500 grams of your favorite bread flour. I'm using King Arthur brand. It's my favorite. If you're measuring in cups and tablespoons, go ahead and check out the description box. I've got the amounts there. 500 grams flour, 340 grams of water, 10 grams of salt, and 12 grams of yeast. If you're using fresh yeast like I am, that is. If you're using instant yeast or active dry yeast, go ahead and use 7 grams or 1 packet. Let's go. Usually I start by pouring the water right in the mixing bowl first. Today I'm going to dissolve my fresh yeast into the water before I do that. You can do this with your active dry yeast or your instant yeast. Just dissolve it all together. A little mixy mix, a little scrapey scrape. Just get the yeast dissolved into the water. Now we can pour our salt right into the water mixture. We're not afraid of salt killing yeast. We think that's a myth anyway. Then flour right on top of everything else. Now all the ingredients are together. Mix it all up with this fancy dough whisk. If you want one of these, there's a link in the description. If you don't want one, you can mix this up with a wooden spoon. Now it's time to knead your dough. Get the counter wet with a little bit of water because we do not knead on a floured surface. I don't care what your grandma's cookbook says. Now this is what your dough should look like before you knead it. It's just shaggy, clumpy, pretty messy. After 8 minutes of kneading, this dough is totally going to transform. It's going to become elastic, pretty, smooth, just perfect. Now I won't show you the whole 8 minutes of kneading, but I will tell you a few things. Take the heel of the palm of your hand, push it through the dough a few times, and pull it back. Do that again a few times, and pull it back. Kneading the dough like this for 8 minutes will totally transform this dough from a sticky mess to a tight ball of dough. You don't need to add any flour. Do this for 8 minutes by hand, or in a KitchenAid mixer on speed 2 with the dough hook. Okay, back to double time. When you're kneading, it's good to get into your happy place. So wherever that is for you, go to your happy place and stay there for about 8 minutes. Then when your table gets a little messy, clean it up with your bench scraper. And then back to business. And when your hand inevitably gets messy from the dough, scrape it off with your bench scraper, put it in the dough, and you're right back to kneading again. Now that you've kneaded your dough for 8 minutes, go ahead and feel it so you can see how much this dough has transformed. It should be smooth, soft, and elastic. Oh yeah, that's perfect. You should be able to stretch your dough out pretty thin so that you can almost see through it before it starts to rip. Now that I'm moving fast again, tighten your dough up into a ball and put it off to the side. Grab a clean bowl, grease it up with your favorite oil so the dough doesn't stick. Then transfer the dough carefully into the bowl, getting oil on both sides. You're going to cover this up and leave it on your counter so that the dough can rise for 2 hours. After the 2-hour rise, take the cover off the dough. It should feel soft, puffy, and airy to the touch, and almost have doubled in size. See? Puffy. Now before we put this dough in our bread pan, we're going to carefully pre-shape it into a ball. So let it slide out of your bowl onto your floured counter, and it should come out of the bowl in somewhat of a circle shape. Just kind of treat it like a circle, and then start gently dimpling the dough with your fingertips, just to get rid of some of that excess air. To form a dough ball out of a circle, grab an edge of the dough and pull it in over the center. Grab the next edge and pull it into the center. Keep going around the dough ball until there aren't any edges left. Then go around a second time, and once you've got a dough ball, flip it over. Now smooth out the dough by cupping and pulling with your hands. Then cover the dough with a towel and let it rest for 15 minutes. 15 minutes are done and gone and our dough's ready to hit the pan. Grab your favorite bread pan. This is mine, old and rusty. Grease it up with your favorite oil. This is olive oil. I hear some pans are non-sticky enough not to need this, but I don't risk it. Now I've slowed this down a little bit so I can show you how to shape this dough to fit your loaf pan. Sprinkle some flour on top of the dough, loosen it up, and flip it over. Now the smooth side is on bottom and the sticky side is on top. Dimple out the dough a little bit and form it into a rough rectangle. Then grab the top of the rectangle and you're going to fold each corner in so a triangle shape starts to form. Press down the seam. Now grab the top of the triangle and you're going to tuck and roll. Tuck and roll. Just do this a few times until you see the loaf shape start to form. Now I've got this extra dough here on the sides. I'm just going to fold that in and tuck and roll a few more times until I've got my final loaf shape. Now you see I've got the smooth side on top and the seam side on the bottom. For this recipe, this dough should fit nice and snugly inside a 2-pound loaf pan. If you don't have a good bread pan, I've got a link in the description where you can buy a 2-pounder. Now an extra step that I like to do is to sprinkle flour on the top and on the bottom of your dough before you put it in the pan. This creates an extra non-stick barrier, so your dough definitely probably won't stick to the pan after you're done baking it. Then just gently put it in the loaf pan. Now this is what our dough looks like before it rises. No need to pop the bubbles, no need to press it down, just let it be. Then cover the dough and let it rise on your counter for 1 hour. 30 minutes before you're ready to bake, preheat your oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 205 degrees C according to Google. I think this is a pretty good temperature to bake bread at when we're baking in a pan. At this point I also like to slip in a metal baking pan or a roasting tray into the oven. This will allow us to add steam into the oven later. I'll show you in a bit. If your dough's been rising for an hour, and it looks like this, it's filled the pan, nice and puffy, you're ready to bake. Now it's time for that steam that I was talking about before. Pull out your baking pan or your roasting tray and pour some boiling water straight into the pan. When the boiling water hits this metal pan, it's going to create steam. That steam in your oven is going to allow your bread to rise, and it'll give it a nice, crispy, delicious crust, exactly what you want. Put your white bread dough right into the oven and bake it for 40 minutes at 400 degrees. White bread. After 40 minutes, your simple white bread should be ready. Give it a double tap, and it should sound hollow in the middle. Let this rest for 5 minutes before depanning. As with any bread, this white bread will be way better if you wait at least an hour before cutting in, but I promise your patience will be rewarded. So just wait. It's been an hour for me, and I am ready to slice in. I, for one, am done with avocado toast, at least for now. I think this bread needs something a little bit different. Let me know in the comments below, what are your favorite sandwich fillings? I would love some new ideas for this bread. Thanks so much for joining me for this simple white bread recipe. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, it really helps me out, and subscribe to the Grant Bakes YouTube channel for new videos every single week on bread, sourdough, and pizza. Thanks so much, guys. I'll see you in the next video. I'm just gonna take this.